The king has been making overtures. There are plenty of people who are happy to go, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, and go along with Charles's frankly crazy plan to allow Harry back to set up a rival court, to stir up trouble for William and make him look better. This is going to be the biggest test of Charles's reign. Is Charles going to let this man baby, frankly, who, insulted him in his memoirs, is Charles going to allow that person back in on a sort of informal representative of the royal family, build a narrative that he's coming back, that Meghan's coming back, that he can be half in, half out, that he can do jobs, that he is available, that he misses his old life.
Prince Harry's delusional half in, half out dream refuses to die. Tom Sykes of The Royalist, learning that Harry will not launch any new legal action against the UK press after his latest Daily Mail case ends. Tom says this is a sharp shift in strategy coinciding with renewed briefing. The decision to pursue a less confrontational strategy with the UK media represents a huge change of direction. And while not exactly a charm offensive, the revelation will add to speculation that he is planning a beefed up UK operation using a classic PR to change perceptions of him rather than aggressive and costly legal action. But Tom says if Harry genuinely wants to operate in Britain again, even in a limited or occasional capacity, remaining in open warfare with the press would make that largely impossible. Of course, this comes as Us Weekly, one of Harry's chief propagandists, claims that, he just wants to help. He just wants to return to the royal family to help them out. And Tom says the offer to help out with royal duties, that is really worth paying attention to. It shows that Harry has not given up on his dream of being half in, half out of the royal family and would like to do royal jobs again. We've seen this before. Harry has previously offered to step in and help, presenting himself as a kind of royal reserve player, a suggestion that reliably triggers deep anxiety within the palace. The last thing William wants is any revival of a half in, half out model, but this kite flying raises the possibility that Harry thinks the king might be persuaded to think differently. The Us Weekly piece also underlines the personal cost of Harry's exile. Friends say he misses the structure, hierarchy, and meaning that royal life once imposed, even as he remains committed to his California existence with Meghan and their children. Now, we're going to speak to Tom for all of the latest on this in just one moment. But first, here is that extraordinarily random reporting from Us Weekly coming directly from Team Sussex. Watch.
Prince Harry has family ties in the UK, but he's putting down roots in Hollywood. In this week's cover story, we explore why he's hoping to find a happy medium. A source says that Harry is so happy living in the private world. Even though he was raised as a royal, he was never comfortable in that environment. He feels more like himself in California. Regardless of where Harry feels he truly belongs, the public still holds him to royal standards. A source tells us he's aware of the optics, but he's trying not to worry about it because he isn't a working royal. Harry wishes he didn't have to choose between his old life and his new one, with a source saying that despite his September sit-down with King Charles, Harry has no intention of returning to the royal fold full-time, but would be happy to step in when needed. Royal author Christopher Anderson tells us Harry has always said the door remains open to some sort of relationship with the royal family. Meghan's focused on their life in Montecito, but he's holding out hope that he can eventually divide his time between California and the UK. Anderson adds that Harry wants his children, Archie and Lilibet, to get to know their British relatives, but he can't make that happen unilaterally. He adds they're learning about Britain in small doses, but make no mistake, they're growing up in California.
Oh my goodness. Tom Sykes, if King Charles was not seemingly open to all of this, I would be like, Harry's just lost his mind. Like, is he living in a parallel universe? But the reality is, he has been given some hope by his father, has he not? And this has led to this delusion. I mean, part of me thinks he's been on the wacky backy, seriously. Like, seriously. But You say William is going to be absolutely concerned for good reason.
Fresh claims circulating in royal circles are igniting intense debate about the dynamics at the very top of the monarchy. Reports suggest growing coordination between King Charles and Prince Harry on key issues, a development that some commentators believe could further strain relations with Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Tonight, Dan is joined by Tom Sykes of the Royalist to examine where these claims are coming from, what's actually been reported, and why the timing has raised eyebrows across royal watchers. Is this a genuine shift in royal relationships? Or another example of speculation filling the silence left by the palace?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, when you look at that clip from Us Weekly that you just played there, you know, it's extraordinary the level of chutzpah, I suppose, that Harry's bringing to I think what we now really must conclude is really a negotiation of what sort of role he's going to have and how his return to the United Kingdom is going to work. Now, it's a one-sided negotiation, right? It's Harry putting forward what he wants. And of course, all of this is very important, you know, as people will have made very clear, to understand this is all couched in terms of Harry wants this. Harry wants his dad to show up at Invictus. Harry wants his dad by his side. Harry wants to help out when, you know, it's appropriate. But so there is obviously one element of this that you can just say, well, yeah, Harry's on the wacky backy and it's just his mad kind of fantasy about what he wants. But I think that ultimately, I don't feel that the king is happy with the situation at the moment of Harry being estranged. And I think we can see, you know, you don't need any palace sources to tell you that the king has been making overtures to Harry and had him to come in for a cup of tea and a slice of cake in September. We saw that with our own eyes. It was very carefully staged for the public. And the message from Charles was very clear. It was, I am open to this reconciliation. And what Harry has done and what his PR team have done, for which, you know, plenty of people will criticize them, but let's be honest, it's a PR technique as old as time, is to build a narrative in the media, build a narrative that he's coming back, that Meghan's coming back, that he can be half in, half out, that he can do jobs, that he is available, that he, you know, he misses his old life. And we've actually seen, of course, Harry saying that himself in that piece that he wrote about how much he missed the banter, etc., etc. And I think really now this is going to be the biggest test of Charles's reign. Is Charles going to let this man baby, frankly, who, you know, insulted him in his memoir, said that he was weak, said that his wife was evil and a scheming plotter, and that they just turned him over to the media to, you know, bolster their own reputations, their own images. Is Charles going to allow that person back in on a sort of informal representative of the royal family? I think it's a huge mistake on Charles's part. I've made no secret of that. The public do not like it. The public really approve of William's stance of, like, you cross us, you're out, buddy. See you later. See you in hell, you know. And what is the ball is now very much in Charles's court. And I think that, you know, this security decision coming down the track, nobody, least of all Harry, believes this line from the palace that the king has nothing to do with it. You know, nobody believes that, not even Harry. And I think that if he gets the security, it becomes a massive game changer, because suddenly you have got, and I have to say as a journalist, it's a very exciting prospect journalistically in terms of this extraordinary story that we've seen unfold between these two brothers over the past 6 years. But you know, if Harry is back in the UK with no discipline, able to do whatever the hell he likes with all the legitimacy that Ravek protection infers, it's going to be an extraordinary new chapter in this story. And I say buckle in for a really, really interesting 2026.
Well, of course, and we know, and we will speak about it, that Prince William has now hired one of the UK's top crisis managers to join his team at Kensington Palace because he sees perpetual crisis ahead. But Tom, in answer to your earlier question, don't we know the answer to that? Don't we know that the answer from Charles is yes? He is going to allow that. And as unpalatable it is for some royal fans, and as we both say, unfortunately, we are here to report the truth, and sometimes the truth doesn't fit the narrative, Charles actually wants this divide. Charles actually wants a challenge to William. He doesn't have a problem with that because from Charles's point of view, William's getting a bit too big for his britches. So the idea of a rival royal court with Harry challenging William is not actually something that King Charles, as bizarre as it sounds, is against.
I think that I think you're right, and I think that we saw over the summer, right, we saw a lot of briefing against William and Catherine being on holiday,
still going on,
blah blah blah, and it's still going on.
I mean, we saw the Mail. Sorry to just interrupt, but we saw the Mail even criticised last week Catherine's winter video in like some coordinated attempt. The Daily Mail, and remember, there's these connections between Tobe and Andre. The King's communications secretary who used to work at the Daily Mail was my boss there. I mean, honestly, Liz Jones was comparing it to the Royal Family documentary from the 1960s, talking about Catherine's beautiful winter video as if it was some type of epic PR fail. Now, we just know that's not even close to the truth. But what Buckingham Palace has, Tom, is control over the mainstream media narrative.
Well, yeah. And so I think what is actually fascinating about this is that there is clearly a bit of a divide between what's coming out through perhaps some of those more informal sources. Camilla, is well known for having good contacts with a lot of these journalists, and the slight sense of pushback from the men in grey suits, whose role, traditionally is protect the monarch from doing unbelievably stupid things. And I get the sense that there is a split within Charles's court itself about this. Like, there are plenty of people who are happy to go, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, and go along with Charles's, frankly, crazy plan to allow Harry back, to set up a rival court, to stir up trouble for William and make him look better. But there are also clearly some grown-ups still in the room who are trying to put out the narrative that Charles won't see Harry, for example, when he's in town, is that Charles won't contemplate any serious reconciliation until there's been a proper apology, that Charles, didn't really mean anything by the meeting in September. Now, these men in grey suit kind of pushbacks actually look less and less convincing, I think, in the face of what we can all see happening in front of our eyes, and I think that it's just a lot depends, I think, on this security decision. And that, I think, will dictate what happens. Although I would say that I do believe that even if Harry doesn't get the security, even if at the last minute Ravek say, well, you've had your stupid RMB, you got what you wanted, and you're not getting it back anyway. Like, even if he doesn't get the security, I think there's no doubt that Harry's going to beef up the operation in the UK. I mean, look at all the signs, Dan. Your head of PR is in the United Kingdom. Why would you hire somebody operating in a time zone
100%.
8 hours different to you? Do you know what I mean? All of Harry's charities are in the UK. Scotty's Little Soldiers, Invictus, Travelist, whatever. There's nothing left in the US. The Parents Network is gone. Like, it feels to me very much like people tying up loose ends, closing everything down in the United States, coming back home with their tail between their legs. Terribly sorry, Pa. Please, can we come back? That's what I think is happening.
100%. And you're right. Some of this tough talk from Buckingham Palace is just not believable because, for example, Tom, absolutely no shutting down of the suggestion that Charles is open to appearing alongside Prince Harry at the opening of the Invictus Games in 2027, which is...
With limited official comment, analysts are parsing statements, court developments, and recent movements to understand whether cooperation between Charles and Harry reflects pragmatism, damage control, or simply overlapping interests, not conflict. Tom Sykes breaks down what can be verified, what remains conjecture, and how William and Catherine's role as future king and queen shapes every interpretation. In a monarchy built on continuity, perception matters, and unchecked narratives can quickly harden into assumed truths. For clear, fact-checked royal analysis without spin, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Comment below. Do you think this is a real realignment or media overreach?
Yeah, isn't it interesting that there has been zero pushback against that story? Of course, reported by Matt Wilkinson.
Front page of the Sun.
Yeah, huge story for Matt, who's a brilliant journalist and has always had a great reputation of turning in great exclusives, has loads of contacts and sources on both sides of,
yes, good guy.
All three camps.
Good guy.
And I think when I wrote about it on Saturday, I said what you're gonna have to look for is whether or not the king pushes back on this, or the king's office pushes back on this. There has been radio silence on it. So, and in fact, if anything, what we've actually seen is suggestions that the king, in his role as the head of the armed forces, probably should be there. Right now, that's not the point. The point is not that the king is the head of the armed forces. The point is that the charity is headquartered by a guy who went to a great deal of trouble to try and harm the institution of which Charles is the head. I mean, it's, I don't know how many times one can say this, but Harry did not have the best interests of the monarchy at heart in his memoir Spare, right? Let's just put it that way.
Of course not. And what this is doing is absolutely shattering to a million pieces what William wants and what, to a lesser extent, but she backs her husband, Catherine, wants. And actually, Tom, I would even argue what Camilla wants, which is exile, permanent exile. And this idea that actually, and if you are a student of history, I think you can look back and think the Queen Mother and the late Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip did do a very good job with the Duke of Windsor after his brief tenure as king, and Wallis Simpson, who were never really allowed back into the fold. I mean, I know there were a couple of visits for funerals, and obviously, the late Queen did go to visit him in France just before his death. But effectively, Tom, that lengthy exile, that idea that they would never be part of the new royal family, meant that they couldn't damage the royal family in the way, given their past as Nazi sympathizers, they could have. And it worked. And Charles is basically saying to William, we're going to make this strategy impossible for you.
Yeah, and I think that's the real concern in William's camp. And you're absolutely right. The Duke of Windsor, that's the playbook, right? That was always said to me over the past few years. That's the playbook. It's the Duke of Windsor. He was sent off to live overseas. He never got back to the UK, a few funerals and stuff like that, of course, where he was allowed to come back. But he was starved of attention. He was starved of proximity to royalty. And ultimately, him and Wallis died really as curiosities, right? They weren't important people. They were just a sort of weird curiosity. And it's also worth remembering that at the point of the abdication crisis in 1936, the British monarchy was in a massive crisis. I mean, far worse than today. It was genuinely looked like curtains for the whole thing. And then, of course, the outbreak of the Second World War, the revelation, the suspicion that a lot of people had at the time, which you can read in There's brilliant diaries by Cecil Beaton, I think, where he talks about that he refers to Edward and Wallace as the Gauleiters, and all this kind of stuff. It was like pretty common knowledge. And of course, it was Andrew Loney in his book, The Traitor King, more familiar these days because of his Prince Andrew book, who really revealed the extent of Edward VIII's collaborations with the Nazis, which even went to the extent of sharing plans of Buckingham Palace with them so that they could have a better chance of killing his brother. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. So the crushing of Edward David as he became, David Duke of Windsor as he became, and Wallace is sort of one of the great triumphs of the establishment, of the monarchy, of the establishment. And the who would have predicted in 1936, 1937, the glory of the Elizabethan age, the royal family more popular than it has ever been. So I think everyone just assumed
and the fact
that's
that
going to be what we're going to do with Harry and Meghan.
Exactly. And the fact that those two just ended up a total footnote. And by the way, for people who say, and there are people in the Sussex squad who do, oh, it's ludicrous to compare Harry and Meghan to Nazi sympathisers. Well, I totally disagree. I would actually argue that what Harry and Meghan want to do to the British royal family is more dangerous, because they wanted to define this family as being an archaic, racist operation to its very core that either needed to be completely overthrown or reinvented, with them at the heart of it. So actually, I think they are as much or more of a threat as what the Duke of Windsor and Wallace Simpson were.
Well, I think they totally are if they're allowed back in the country and they're allowed to start representing the royals again. And there's no accountability, to use one of their favourite words, for the unbelievable damage that they sought to inflict on the royal family that sort of ultimately actually didn't really work, right? Like, and I think that if you talk to Harry's friends at the time that the book and the film were coming out, it was pure fury, it was pure rage. It was like, we want to stand. Now, of course, it's very like, oh, we love the institution and we want to work with it again, actually. And it's like they took a shot at the king and they didn't kill him, which is a very dangerous thing to do, quite literally. And now there's a sort of rewriting of history, which is like, oh, actually, the book and the film weren't really designed to damage the monarchy. They were just about our personal accountability and our personal mental health and this kind of stuff. Well, I mean, it's complete rubbish. I mean, it clearly was intended to damage the monarchy. And I don't think that if, as a result of that book, there had been a popular uprising in the UK and people had gathered outside Buckingham Palace beating saucepans and King Charles had been forced to step down, I don't think Harry and Meghan would have been very upset, actually.
No, I think they wanted it. I think they wanted it. They wanted more, because remember, at that point, Tom, they thought they were going to go and become the biggest successes in Hollywood, be completely financially solvent, billionaires. They had no idea how things would look 6 years on, and they do look very different. But I mentioned earlier, Tom, the fact that William has now brought this crisis management specialist, one of the top crisis management PRs, into his team, into his inner circle. Now, again, I don't buy all of the mainstream reporting on this, because there is some suggestion, oh, this is all about bringing William closer to Charles, because Charles's former advisor, Julian Payne, works with the new woman. Well, I mean, look, I know Julian Payne, who for a long time was advising the king when Meghan and Harry were in the royal family. He is not about bringing people together whatsoever. He's about throwing other people under the bus. And regularly, by the way, threw William and Catherine under the bus to try and get better headlines for the king. So I do not believe for a single second that mainstream media narrative that this is all about William and the king coming closer together. I believe this is about William preparing for a war. Okay, you can say it's a PR war, but it's more than that, isn't it? Because it's a battle for the fight of the future of the British monarchy against Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, taking place right here in the United Kingdom. But talk to me about what you're picking up about this appointment.
Yeah, so Lisa Ravenscroft, I'm told it's Eliza, not Eliza, but not sure. Other people are saying Liza, but from what I've spoken to, people who've worked with her have said she's Eliza. The There are these official sort of protestations that we just needed another member of the team, and she's just great, and blah 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 blah. Um, but yeah, it seems to me that the word has gone round that Harry's coming back, and like obviously, look, if you and me are picking that up, I'm sure William is picking that up. William's team are really smart. He has this guy called Lee Thompson, who's had for kind of 6 or 7 years, who used to be the head at NBC, really sort of digital savvy. And Lee's one of those people who's good at picking up the sort of weak political signals that tell you which way that the wind is blowing. He's an operator, to be sure, and like I think that it's very hard to escape the notion that this is staffing up for conflict. That is what is going on. Like, why would you hire the head of crisis management at Edelman? Like, I mean, that's clearly the reason. There was quite an interesting profile in the Telegraph where they had seemed to kind of been briefed that it was all to deal with the future fallout of Andrew over the years ahead, which I guess is a convenient fig leaf. But I think that, the Andrew problem, I have my issues with it, and I'm sure we'll get on to the removal trucks in a minute. But like I have my issues with it, like there's no accountability for Andrew in terms of legal and that. But in terms of public opinion, it's worked, right? What they've
It's
done,
dealt with.
yeah, they've packaged it up, they've put it in a box, they've taped the box shut, and they've sent the box off to Sandringham. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of done.
Totally.
So I
Totally.
don't really buy it.
Although, if he is going to write this book, and look, for a long time, his people have always denied to me that there is going to be a book. Andrew Lowney is picking up something else. So actually, what we're going to do is we'll move over to the second part of the Royal Uncounseled